Today we will be talking about the great American pastime. And no, I'm not talking about baseball. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for another poetry discussion, which will appear, of course, inside the Poetry Discussion playlist, now cruising towards 650 videos, something like that, close to it. The poem in question today is Casey at the Bat by Ernest Lawrence Thayer. And don't pay attention to the line breaks, because in order to get the poem in a place where it's able to be seen on screen, I had to sort of get let me see if I can. Here we go. I'm sure this will be absolutely scintillating to watch, but I'm going to take down the left margin and see if we can correct those. Let's see. Where are we at here? Why did it take me to the bottom? That's my talking point. Don't read that yet. Yeah, we're pretty good now. All right. Casey at the Bat, a ballad of the Republic, sung in the year 1888. It reads as such. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. And then, when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of that game. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought if only Casey could but get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake. And the former was a Lulu, and the latter was a cake. So upon that stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive a single, to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted, and men saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second, and Flynn a hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley, it rattled in the dell. It knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat, for Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And when, responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat, no stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then, while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye, a sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said. From the benches, black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him! Kill the umpire! Shouted someone in the stand, and it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew, but Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said strike two. Fraud, cried the maddened thousands, and echo answered fraud. But one scornful look from Casey and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain. And they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball. And now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. So, I talked about the great American pastime. The great American pastime not being baseball. I think we can all agree that football has usurped what baseball was, even if baseball is probably more literary than football. I think when you're looking at this very poem, the idea of mano y mano, very easy to transcribe, right? Very difficult to talk about 11 on 11 football. Very difficult to pick one player out of offense and one player out of defense to really make the literature about those two on the field. Very difficult. But really, the American pastime, there's two in this poem. Number one, subversion of expectation. The entire time we're reading this poem, we are expecting the mighty Casey, big and bold, to get up to bat and right out of the park, right? Home run. Into next week. It's what we're expecting. That's what we are drawn to expect by the very stanzas of this poem. We are supposed to believe that Casey's going to come up to bat and knock it right out of the park. He's a hero, after all, and that leads to the second American pastime, tearing down heroes. We love it. We don't like authority in the United States. We hate authority. And because we hate authority, we can't have any heroes. Heroes are, by definition, authority. So heroes, if you go way back, you go way, way back to when they had literally, like in this poem, hero battles. The pitcher would be the opponent's hero. Casey, Mudville's hero. What hero battles used to be is, there's a very good example of this in the movie Troy with Brad Pitt. It is Achilles and Boagrius. So two armies are meeting on the field, and sometimes they would just say, hey, there's no need for everyone to die. We have this battle and so many men are going to be killed. Neither one of us will really be able to run our cities once we get back. So here's what we'll do. My best guy and your best guy. It'll all be on their backs. And if my best guy wins, then I have won this war. And if your best guy wins, then, well, by golly, you win this war. That was hero battle. Baseball is a great example of hero battle. It's the pitcher and the batter. Mano y mano. Obviously, there are better examples of this. There's Hemingway's obsession with boxing, right? These things become very literary. There's Hemingway's obsession with bullfighting. Mano y bullo. So what heroes are in the ancient world was they were a middleman between us and the gods. Heroes were more than men, but less than gods. Achilles, the fine warrior Achilles, nearly invincible, except for that one little Achilles tendon, would be invincible were it not for that. It's interesting to note this poem from 1888. Is that literally the publication date? You're looking at a poem then that was barely that was written basically 112 years after the founding of the country. And it's interesting to look at this poem and see how many of these little things baseball players still do. Still rub the dirt in their hands, right? Still tap the plate with the bat. This is 140 years after that. When we're reading this poem, though, it is almost fortuitous. Casey at the bat, the big guy who's going to hit the home run. Written in 1888. Born in 1895 was Babe Ruth. This was his M.O. Babe Ruth would get up to bat when all of everything was sort of at stake and hit home runs. Babe Ruth, born in 1895, he became a major leaguer, if I can find this, 1914. So 26 years after this poem was published, we got the incarnation of Casey that basically still lives to this day. Babe Ruth, the most iconic baseball player of all time, probably always will be. His career having started over 100 years ago now. This great American pastime of tearing down heroes. Like I said, we don't do well with authority in the United States. And heroes, well, they're not politicians, but they're supposed to be virtuous. And if we can find something to tear down, we'd really prefer to tear down politicians. But heroes will do. We'd really prefer to tear down kings. But heroes will do. Really, we'd prefer to tear down idols and gods. But a baseball player or two will do. How American is this idea? How American is this poem? A seeming disdain for authority. Baseball itself. Going right up to the fact that when things aren't going their way, before the game is even ended, a lot of these folks are just abandoning ship. Going home, leaving the stands. I'm sure as well there's something to be made of the fact that probably, I don't think it's in here, but probably Casey's the leadoff man, right? Because we have the example of, if I can get back here, we have the example of the two men who are up before Casey. And is it Flynn here? Give me 1 second. I apologize. Flynn and Blake, the much despised. This was already a practice in 1888. Everybody knew the guy who was worst on the team, probably, he's batting ninth. Ninth is the least likely guy on your squad to get a hit. So you bury him at ninth. Casey is coming up to lead off. It is just maybe that, if I can use the term, maybe that's too inside baseball. But it is an interesting quirk of this poem as well that the 8th and 9th hitters, the 8 and 9 guys, the guys who were the worst on the team and the next to worst on the team, both did their jobs. The little guys, the underdogs, both did their jobs. It was Casey who came up to bat and couldn't get it pulled off. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel. There is poetry on the channel every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.